Thank you all for joining FY 2019 fourth quarter earnings presentation today. Thanks also to those of you who are joining us remotely through the live broadcast. Before we get to our results, I'd like to spend a minute talking to you about the evolution of the interactive entertainment business and Nexon's strategy within that landscape. I'm going to then follow up with a brief recap of our performance in the fourth quarter and for the full year 2019, our plan for growth in 2020, and spend some time on our exciting game pipeline for 2020. And then I'm going to conclude briefly by touching on our approach to shareholder returns. Okay, so let's start by talking about the industry today. We think it's helpful to think of the video games industry in terms of four quadrants. In the x-axis here, we have offline versus online games. So offline on the left-hand side, online games on the right-hand side. And on the y-axis, we have deep game experiences versus casual game experiences on the bottom. Now, this is not scientific. This didn't come from any external analysts. We didn't get this from any consultants. This is just what we draw on the whiteboard internally at Nexon when we think about the business. It's also not a value judgment. Each of these four quadrants can be good businesses by themselves. It's just a way to think about the business, especially when we frame about what Nexon's strategy is all about. So thinking about the last 25 years of the games business, the games industry started mostly in the upper left-hand quadrant. These were the types of games that I played when I was a kid, which is now quite a long time ago, unfortunately. But this is the realm of deep offline games, single-player games, primarily on consoles and on PCs. By the way, again, there was no science in terms of what games we chose to put up here. Mostly these were the ones that came off the top of my head and the folks that we built this slide with. Now, there are many great games and franchises in that area, but the key thing here is that Nexon's really never played in this area of deep single-player games. Okay, then thinking historically, the internet enabled the right-hand side of the graph. And around the mid-90s, when Nexon and some other companies in Korea and then China invented the online game and then free-to-play. Then about 12 years ago, Facebook and smartphones really unlocked the lower half of the graphic and made it a big business. This is the realm of casual games. Now, Nexon's core strength, our history, where we've always really focused, has been in the upper right-hand quadrant. That's the area of deeply immersive online games. We sometimes call them virtual worlds because you have a very immersive experience with thousands of other connected players at the same time. And even though they may look simple on the surface, they're designed to be experienced almost as a Second Life. As a matter of fact, there is a game called Second Life. From another publisher. Now, from a business perspective, the key thing to know about this is that in the past, these types of games, the ones in the upper right, were really only available on the PC platform. And then starting about 24 months ago, we've seen the iPhone 10 and equivalent mobile platforms become much more powerful and powerful enough to act really like a PC. And what that means for a company like us is that rather than having a total addressable market, a TAM of a few 100 million gamer PCs, our total addressable market is now literally several billion people who have full workstation functionality in their pockets. This is an increase of roughly 10 times in the total addressable market. And of course, the mobile unit number is rising very rapidly. We think this is really important, and this is a massive opportunity for Nexon. Our core competency is in the upper right, and it's in the upper right that has the best growth going forward and the fewest number of competitors who can make and grow these types of immersive games. Games I'll show you later in this presentation are all in the upper right-hand quadrant. So this is where we see opportunity, and this is where our focus lies as a company. Now, with that as a backdrop, I'm going to briefly review our performance in Q4 and for the full year 2019, and then I'm going to talk about our future. Group revenues in Q4 came in ahead of our expectations, driven by the phenomenal strength of the Korea region. Our major franchises, especially MapleStory and FIFA Online performed exceptionally well, and V4 is off to a very strong start. Our Q4 performance in Korea marked our highest Q4 revenue ever. On an as-reported basis, revenues and operating income for the full year 2019 were down year over year due to FX headwinds, while net income was up versus a year ago. On a constant currency basis, full year 2019 revenues, operating income, and net income all grew year over year. The growth was, again, primarily driven by Korea, demonstrating the strength of our major franchises in that market. MapleStory in Korea, which is our second biggest franchise, continues to amaze. The game marked another revenue record in 2019, surpassing the previous record set in 2018. On a constant currency basis, Q4 MapleStory on the PC grew 88% year over year, and the mobile version of MapleStory grew 114%. On a full year basis, constant currency revenues grew 39% and 65%, respectively. This was on top of an already strong 2018, where PC and mobile MapleStory year-over-year growth was 67% and 81%, respectively. PC and mobile MapleStory each recorded double-digit growth for the sixth and the third consecutive years, respectively. As a reminder, MapleStory PC originally launched in 2003, and MapleStory M launched in 2016. As you can see from the graphs on the bottom of this page, they have been incredible performers over time. This is what we mean by forever franchises. FIFA Online 4 also recorded the highest Q4 and full year revenue, growing significantly year over year, surpassing the previous peak of FIFA Online 3 that was achieved in 2017. Okay, now on to China Dungeon Fighter. Q4 revenues decreased year over year, but came in slightly ahead of our expectations. Full year revenues also declined year over year due to its soft performance in the second half of 2019, when we faced challenges following the June update that did not resonate well with our players as we had hoped. During the earnings call last quarter, we said that we expected things to be challenging for the next few quarters, and we still expect that to be the case. Over the course of Q4, we conducted multiple in-game events and dropped small-scale updates in addition to the national update, which continued from Q3. Most recently, we introduced the Lunar New Year update on January 14th, and so far, we've not experienced a notable pickup, and the sales from this year's Lunar New Year update is expected to decline substantially from 2019's very strong performance. We think the next important event for Dungeon Fighter comes later in the first half of 2020, when we launch a new update that addresses the primary feedback that we have received from our players. In December, our operating team at Neopol announced to our players in China that this key update will become available in China in March. The update includes the level cap release and the Third Awakening, which allows players to gain new skills for their characters. This update went live last month in Korea, and Korea performance has historically been a good indicator of how things will be received in China. The reviews by our players in Korea have been good, with better key performance indicators after the introduction of the update. We have a number of other projects underway for DNF PC, and are very focused on bringing improvements to our player base that will drive further growth. Okay, now onto the mobile version of DNF. We've made some great progress since our last call. In December, together with our partner Tencent, we began the second closed beta test for MDNF in China. We are happy with the encouraging results we observed during the test and went on to start pre-registration for the game later that month. As of today, more than 16 million people have signed up and are waiting for the game's launch in the first half of 2020. We are extremely excited to deliver the deep, immersive, multiplayer online world of Dungeon Fighter to many more people in the region on the mobile platform, and we think mobile represents a massive increase in the total addressable market for the game. Meantime, we launched V4 in November. It's early, but so far we're very satisfied with its performance, especially given its competition in the Korean market. As you can see, it has since launch, it's been in the top 5 as of last night. It was at number 4 on Android and iOS. Android, just for reference, I think most people here know Android is about 70% of the market, of the mobile market in Korea. So far, so good. At this point, I'd like to pause and I'd like to place Nexon's key IP in the context of other great media franchises around the world so you get a sense of the scale and the future potential. Several of Nexon's franchises have been played by hundreds of millions of players around the world and generate revenue that is both recurring and growing over time. First, let's look at MapleStory, a 16-year-strong franchise which has amassed more than 180 million registered players worldwide. It's so deeply woven into the culture that player registrations now equal 45% of the total number of people in Korea. In terms of revenue, MapleStory PC and mobile total is about equal to the global box office of the movie franchise Frozen, which is one of Disney's largest. In terms of total players, life-to-date user registrations of MapleStory PC are larger than life-to-date unit sales of one of the greatest game franchises of all time, the Final Fantasy series on PC and console. So MapleStory is in very good company. Next is KartRider, Nexon's fully online multiplayer racing game originally introduced in 2004. Now, KartRider may not be fully on the radar of the people who follow games closely in Japan and the US, but more than half of the Korean population and over 45% of the Taiwanese population has played this game. Life-to-date registered users of KartRider total more than 380 million people worldwide. For a sense of scale, that is over 100 million more people than Mario Kart, which is clearly the gold standard of the genre and one of the great games of the entire games industry. We have enormous respect for Nintendo and the craftsmanship they put into Mario Kart. Now, acknowledging that free-to-play business model is quite different, we think that the reach of these two game IP is very important. One of the points about entertainment IP is that the fact that you've had many hundreds of millions of people experience the IP's game world for many hours creates a very large and very receptive audience for new versions or expansions or extensions of that IP. So reach of the IP really does matter if you can make use of it. And that's exactly what we're doing. In 2020, we will be releasing an all-new KartRider. Unlike the previous versions, which was only for PC, the new version will be on multiple platforms all over the world. We think this is a massive opportunity for Nexon's customers as well as its shareholders. Okay, and last but not least is Dungeon Fighter. We launched this fully online RPG in 2005, and since then it has garnered a massive fan base that exceeds 700 million registered users globally. So to put that in some comparison, that's more than 2 times more than Fortnite across all platforms as of 2019. Life-to-date Dungeon Fighter has grossed well more than $10 billion US. That is several billion dollars more than the life-to-date receipts for both Star Wars and Harry Potter series box office, and roughly double the revenue for the entire Avengers series. And remember, DNF is still only on PC, and PC installed base is a small percentage of total game players. You can see why we're so excited to bring this franchise to mobile players, which have an installed base of, by our estimates, more than 10 times that of PC, and growing very quickly. Now, in 2019, Nexon went through a major transition. Our management team spent a lot of time resetting the strategic pillars of our global business. We believe these will result in better games, a more robust business, and strong returns for our shareholders. The 4 core tenets are, first, focusing on a portfolio of fewer but bigger, fully online multiplayer games in virtual worlds. Second, enabling these virtual worlds to be played across multiple hardware platforms, PC, console, and mobile. Third, leveraging our substantial IP portfolio to generate long-lasting games with significant recurring revenue. And fourth, as appropriate, placing bets on new IP that we think are really special. Our acquisition of Embark last year is an example of this. In 2020, you'll start to see us roll out products that are based off of these 4 themes. So with that in mind, I'd now like to show you 3 big beats we have planned for 2020. The next one up, the one that's coming up in the near term, is Dungeon Fighter 2D Mobile. The mobile version of one of the biggest game franchises in the world. I mentioned this before, but our development team has been working hard to make sure that this fully online multiplayer action game will work well across the China mobile internet. We recently had a terrific beta, so today I'd like to show you some of the game scenes from that most recent closed beta test. Okay, so next is Kart Rider Drift, which is the next Kart Rider, the PC franchise, which has been played by more than half of the Korean population. 3 things to know about this new version, Kart Rider Drift. First, when it launches, it will not just be on PC, but consoles and other platforms as well. Second, it's built from the bottom up to be fully online. That means it has a lot of features online game players love and have not seen in either casual or hardcore racing games. Third, it's free to play. No other game has this set of features. We just completed our first round of closed beta testing, and we plan to introduce it in 2020 to players around the world on multiple platforms. And third, later this year, we'll be talking a lot more about the new game from Embark. It's a multiplayer co-op action game, and we think it is really exciting. Embark's team is truly extraordinary from both a creative and a technology perspective, and we think what they are working on will change online games in the West. Okay, so now let me put the strategic priorities I talked about earlier, as well as our 2020 game pipeline, into the context of our drivers for growth and shareholder value going forward. Nexon has a great foundation that consists of a world-class portfolio of franchises that are as big or bigger than the very best movie and game franchises around the world. While these game franchise revenues can fluctuate during their long life cycle, our extensive experience has shown again and again that the franchise revenues can continue to grow over decades, despite near-term fluctuations. This is a key point to understand about a business, about our business and that of companies like us. Now, Nexon is well positioned to lead the next wave of online games as platform providers invest heavily into the games business and build a much bigger addressable market for us. I talked about mobile before, but it's also true about advances in console and cloud-based technologies from newer entrants such as Google and Amazon. All of these platform providers are spending billions to bring high-end game platforms to consumer mass markets way beyond the previous online business, which was largely focused on PC. Because of all this, we see big opportunities to get our online games and virtual worlds in the hands of at least 10 times as many players as there were previously, and we will be aggressive on leaning into these opportunities. The three big game beats of 2020, DNF Mobile, Kartrider, Drift, and Embark's game, are just the beginning. Okay, lastly, I'd like to briefly touch on our cash allocation and shareholder returns of FY19, since we get asked a lot about this, and our board of directors and I review it frequently. In 2019, Nexon Group generated operating cash flow of 105.1 billion yen, or a little less than $1 billion US. Our working capital was 10.3 billion yen. We made equity investments in Embark Studios as well as Wonder Holdings, which totaled 38.4 billion yen in 2019. These two companies make games that are firmly in the upper right quadrant I talked about earlier, meaning that they're about deeply immersive online games. Additionally, we returned 30 billion yen to our shareholders in the form of a share buyback. Now, after all these expenditures, we kept a surplus of 26.4 billion yen. Now, we're going to continually re-examine the best use of our cash flow and flexibility we need to grow Nexon's global business. However, we think 2019 represents an allocation that is good for our shareholders, with a good balance of shareholder return and of investments.